All right, welcome everyone to the Using Non-Human Personas in Design webinar. Thank you for coming along. Looking forward to sharing this with you tonight. Welcome Thurston, good to see you. Just kicking off. So tonight I want to talk to you about non-human personas, which is a new version of an old tool of user personas. I will give you a little introduction to a bit more about what non-human personas are, show you some examples of them in practice, and talk you through a method that I've developed through some research, and then introduce the journey backpack that comes along with the guidebook. First of all, just let me tell you a little bit about myself so you have sort of context where this research is coming from. I am a senior UX designer researcher in Sydney, Australia. I do UX, UI, some research, a little bit of service design as well. And then in my spare time, I scout the fringes of design. I look to see what more we can do with design than just selling things and making profit. So I really look into values-driven design, long-term thinking, how we can use design to connect people and people with nature. And then I try to bring that back in today's world. What that means basically is that I'm a massive design nerd. And just to prove that, I've created 2 websites to share this design and this thinking. So one is life-centered design, which is about expanding human-centered design, to think more about think about products as ecosystems that span countries and time, and that ecosystem impacts people and nature, and how can we design our products and services so that they have less impact and hopefully give back more. And then there's futurescouting.com.au, which is looking at how to use futures design, which is researching signals of change, creating future scenarios, and looking at them to rethink what we're doing today, and perhaps to inform our design today to change it. Welcome to everyone's coming in. I do a little bit of blogging, so I share my research articles in more detail on Medium. And I co-founded a Life-Centered Design Collective with these wonderful people. We created the website, lifecentereddesign.co. It's where we developed principles for life-centered design, of which non-human personas is a part. And then we experiment with different tools, life-centered tools to develop the process. So what are non-human personas? I guess a lot of you as designers are familiar with user personas, that are these fictional biographies of real people that represent groups that have shared needs. And non-human personas are basically the same thing. They'll represent a part of nature or an invisible human, and they're to remind us, they help us empathize with those parts of nature that we use in our products and our services and our businesses, and remind us of their needs so we can keep their needs in mind as we design. There's lots of different types of non-human of these personas. So there's ones that represent individuals, like bees or animals as such. There's ones that represent more of the environmentals, so like trees, the atmosphere. You can create ones that are more general, like nature or earth. They're really good for sort of an introductory workshop to get you thinking about more broadly about your product and your business and its impact on nature. Then you create these non-user ones that about the invisible humans that attach in the ecosystem of our products and services. So like child workers, or factory workers, or people working in the recycling factory, the other end of the life cycle. There's a QR code there as well. You can scan that and just hear an audio persona. So there's different types of mediums that you can use as well. And actually, I just want to share with you a little bit of a video, which is kind of like a video non-human persona.
My own paradise. I need not apologize for that. I will not apologize for being welcoming and defensive at the same time. I will not apologize for being out of control. I will not provide income for over 6,000 families and call myself a calamity at the same time.
So as you can see, that can be quite powerful. These multimedia personas as such really help sort of engage people, and but it's interesting how that one's actually created of what a non-living entity, which you can actually create them for, whether it's a dump site or e-waste, or even a building or a mountain. So we can use them to represent the things that are just forgotten about in design. So basically, I guess, as a definition, their non-human and non-use personas are both a tool and a method that support the thriving existence of all life forms on the planet. It's just to help us designers and decision makers connect with them when we're making decisions, whether it's design or business decisions. They are a tool and a method, and the method is just as important. So I'll talk about that a bit later. I was first introduced to the ideas of non-human persona by Monica Schnell, her really great article on Medium that I recommend you reading. She has a few there. She introduced these two key tools, life-centered design tools. So one is mapping your system, your ecosystem, the broader system, and the actants that are impacted, whether they're humans, animals, or environments. And then once you've identified them, to represent them as a persona. And this really inspired me to start using them. And I actually used them to apply it to my first book, the Life-Centered Design book, because I thought, well, how can I use a persona to, reduce the book's impact and also the website? So I'll talk about that project shortly. But what I realized while I was experimenting with them was that there's really amazing people around the world that are also using them. That's a new tool that's possibly perhaps Sarah, let me just get this right. Hey, Monica, welcome. It's a new tool, so we've got to be careful of the things that we don't know that they can do as well. They'll be good and bad. So I reached out to these different people. Sandy Donhart, who has Green the Web, who's really generous with the knowledge that she has. She shares on that great website, who works mainly in the digital space. Jeroen Spolstra, who's in Spain, who's applying non-human thinking to business, product, environment design. Victor Udoy in the US, who works more at the service level. Myself, I've included my own projects in this. Martin Tomic, who's the head of the Transdisciplinary School at UTS here in Sydney. And Ben and Fiona from And Us, a design agency in the UK that also works across Europe. They were really interesting because they're at the beginning of their journey and learning how to introduce non-human personas to their clients. It was really interesting to talk to all these different people and how they're using it in different practices and at different stages of their experience. I'm just going to put someone on mute there. Okay, and so all this sort of insight culminated into, I really just interviewed everyone to write an article, which I did, but there was just so much amazing insight and made me realize there's a whole process to working with non-humans, and that led me to produce the guidebook. This is someone with a bit of background noise. Let's see if I can get everyone on mute, if that's okay. Thank you. So here's some examples of non-human personas in the wild in design practice. So as I said before, I applied it to my small business, which was a great opportunity because it was a website, a digital product and a physical product. It's just a sort of a small experimentation. As I said, I created the persona for trees. So the first step is really identifying what non-humans and non-users you work with. And that's a whole step in itself. For me, sometimes it's really obvious. For this, it was quite obvious. I produce books, so I wanted to, they use paper and trace it back to trees. So I made a persona for trees. And then just through some methods and tools, came up with a few ideas of what I could do. So one is I'm using print on demand. So instead of going to a traditional publisher who then can print thousands of books and ship them all around the world where they might not sell, they might go to waste. I use print on demand, so I just print the ones. I just use the trees needed for when somebody actually wants the book. There's an argument that maybe that creates a lot of deliveries, and so it might have sort of rebound effects. So this is the sort of thing we need to think about when we're trying to use these tools. What is the unintended consequences? then I also realized that, it's about also enabling responsible users. So in my books, I have it at the back of a page that just tells you how to care for your book. If you rip it, if your page comes out, you can use non-toxic glue, and also what to do with it when you're finished with it, how to pass it on and keep it in circular loops. Again, the longer it's used, the less likely something new needs to be created and more materials are used. And then thinking about another thing that the non-human personas can help you think about is how do you regenerate them? So how do you give back? So I use a portion of sales of any of my printed books from my future scouting site and life centered design, and I plant trees with some of the profits. And then I also enable users to donate. So there's a link, there's a bit of promotion about this one tree planted, and there's a link there to donate. So some really simple little things. But if you imagine that if this was multiplied by the millions of websites or little businesses, it could compound to a much greater impact. And it has this effect where you're starting to connect people, like businesses, with the users and the parts of nature that make this connection actually able to be experienced. Another example, so this is for the digital space, excuse me. So I looked at how Instagram, what Instagram could do. Applying non-human personas to digital is kind of tricky because first you have to identify them. If you have a physical product, you can look at the materials and you can kind of see really easily what non-humans are impacted. There's a really great tool, again, by Sandy Dainhart in her website, Green the Web. She has a sustainability journey map, which just gives you prompts your ideas on how to think about the impacts of that website. But you can also think about, okay, what system is your website a part of? It's part of the digital tech industry. So we can think about who are the main parts of nature and the invisible humans impacted by that industry. You can choose one of those and see what you can do, with your digital business to reduce the harm and regenerate them. And I always thought, okay, social media, it just has us addicted to our devices, and therefore we're going through new devices all the time. And in fact, they wouldn't exist without these devices. So they need all these materials, but then they're part of the system that contributes e-waste. So I thought, how can social media giant do something about e-waste? So I created this profile, this persona. Again, it's a non-human entity. It's a non-living entity. So I find something really useful is to always write a little empathy summary of your findings that talks about the non-human's needs and its threats and its desires, its fears from their perspective, which you can read, you can record it so that at the beginning of any design, you can listen to that recording as well. But it does kind of take you in this space where you're really starting to empathize from nature's needs, what they actually need and what we're doing to them. So, okay, what's the output? So thinking about Instagram's influence, its power, it has this amazing predictive algorithm. I've downloaded my data from Instagram. I can see it knows my device. So it knows our device and it knows your brand. It knows how old your device might be because it's like mine's an X, it's very old. It knows, oh, you might be in looking for a new device. So it shows us ads, right, based on what it predicts about us. But then, and it doesn't have to stop showing those ads. It doesn't have to stop making money from those ads. But at the same time, it could start showing us ads to encourage sustainable user behavior, what to do with our old device. First of all, encourage us just to repair it and keep it in use. It could encourage us to trade it in or recycle it. And the interesting thing about what they could actually do is they could make recycling 2 steps. They show you this ad. There's a place here, a company here in Australia called Mobile Muster. They will send you a satchel for free. You put your phone in and you post it back and it gets recycled. It just makes it so easy, easier than just throwing it in the e-waste bin or, leaving it in a drawer. But that journey actually takes at least 5 steps otherwise. And you'd have to know Mobile Muster exists to search for it. And then you go to a website and you read through and then you find this offer. But Instagram could get it proactively in front of people using its predictive algorithm and make it much easier to engage with. They could do that with phone repairs. You could book a repair straight from within Instagram or a trade-in. There's plenty of other things they could do as well. So thinking wider, they could offer discounts for advertisers who show that they are using circular design and making their products last longer, and use fair work conditions. They could collaborate with other social media to share their prosperity, to perhaps you've got these workers all along the supply chain, perhaps invest in education for them to help them do more with their lives as well. What could we do with influencers? Perhaps we transform them into motivators who are actually motivating people to live more planet friendly. So one final example, and this is a physical product. How might a mattress manufacturer regenerate the river systems? So why the river systems? So this is an interesting step of non-human personas. So as I mentioned before, it's taking a systems view. This is a product lifecycle map that I've created. I'll zoom in a little bit. It's just so you can, in the navy's rectangle in the middle, it's where you map what happens to your product, what happens to the materials, how they're processed into parts. You map what happens in the supply chain. When it's used, what do users do? Does it get discarded and ended landfill, or does it go into loops of reuse? And you're just capturing activity, images. You can use infographics, but you're also capturing is on the outside at the top, what's used through the process. For example, so we know the materials are cotton for the cover of a mattress. This is where it gets really interesting. So you can see, okay, water is used to produce cotton. You've got these workers as well, that water is used again in the processing and the manufacturing of mattresses. Water is also, the river systems are polluted by the chemicals that are used. There's runoff, so they end up in the river system. And at the other end, soil and rivers are impacted again by the chemicals that leach out of the mattresses in landfill. So what's interesting is suddenly you see that the river systems are an important non-human related to mattresses, to what we sleep on every night. And so I create a persona for that. And so by using the personas, you could do, it helps you innovate from a few different perspectives. So one is you innovate the product. How do you use different materials that say impact the river less, that doesn't use as much chemicals? You can innovate the life cycle, but you can kind of get these ideas from using circular design thinking into sustainable design. So this is where I think is a real impact of non-human personas, is that it takes you further. So for example, this mattress company could develop an app. So say they call their bed the riverbed, and they make this riverbed buddy app. Gives you notification that tells you when to flip your mattress. So it's helping users care for their product to keep it longer, so less materials have to be used to make new ones. It could be a quick booking functionality where you can book collection of your old mattress, again, to avoid it going into landfill. But then you take it further, where you can help users engage with their local rivers, help them engage with the non-human, and get back out into nature. And you could also include stories about the non-human. So in this scenario, you could use stories, river stories, and you can interweave that with First Nations stories as well. So you're connecting people with nature, with the non-human, but also people with people and different cultures. And this is, I think, the real power of non-human personas. Non-human personas is a journey. Just how we're going for time, we're doing good. So I've created a journey map. Because every good journey needs a map. It's the same steps for, it's the same map for whether you're doing digital or physical product, but just different tools and slightly different considerations. But it really is a journey in the sense that it's about empathizing with, the parts of nature and the people we don't think about in the supply chain. And that can get really, really uncomfortable because it's a bit of a reality check. But I would recommend that you use that discomfort as a measure that you're going deep enough. You've gone deep enough at least to start with, because you're feeling something, and that's what using personas is all about, is empathy and feeling. So be aware that you're going to have these uncomfortable feelings, but use them as a means of knowing that you're going deep enough, and also knowing that you're going to turn that feeling, that energy, into action that's going to have benefit afterwards. So that's what I was just discussing there, the method. It's really, really important. It's as important as the tool itself, because this is where you're really creating that connection through research and learning, The research, you need to keep it really fact-based. Although you can create kind of stories about them, but the research and the data that you're making decisions on needs to be really evidence-based. You should connect with experts if you can. You can't always. So there's a toolkit that I will show you in a minute, and that has a bit of a research guide to help you ensure your, so if you're just doing desktop research, is really as evidence-based as possible. And then you create the persona, which I call a living snapshot, because it needs to be living. You want to keep it editable, right? So you can keep adding to it as you learn, and you'll learn over time. And it's a snapshot because it's really just a snapshot of how it is at that time. In the corner, there's an image of this lake persona that Drew and Spilstra's created. He's just created the persona as a web page. So it's another beautiful way that you can represent these personas. And it's interesting that the whole idea of persona is actually it's not new. It's kind of can be related back to First Nations concept of totems, where every individual have a totem, and it represents an animal or an entity in nature, and you would then learn about that part of nature, and you would be responsible for it. You would ensure that people knew about it and treated it well, and that's kind of exactly what non-human personas are doing. So I think that's really, really interesting, because it's also connecting us as designers and modern design back to how we once lived in a much more sustainable way. So that brings me to the end of the presentation with plenty of time. You can access, so you get the books online, but for my books, I actually create these toolkits. So you just need to create a free account at lifecenter.design, and gives you access to the members dashboard, and you access the tools for both books. There's some workshop tools. With the non-human persona guide, I've created a journey backpack. It's a virtual journey backpack, and that has your maps. Actually, I can show you here. See, once you've signed in, you can see the journey maps. You can download those as well. They're part of the toolkits. So the toolkits look like this, and in them are all the tools that you need, your map, and there's the research guide I was talking about that just help you know how to research properly and where to look as well. There's links to the projects. So if you go to a project, that will link you to project page. Oops. It is roll up there. This is a project page. So it just kind of tells you what the persona was, what the project was, the outcomes. Then you can zoom in to the actual Miro board project and see how all the tools were used in that project. And then the really cool thing about this work of the backpack is the library. So you can see all these different personas that I've gathered from different people, different fidelity. Some of these are students. There's one there from Martin Tomich. Yeah, all different kinds there. Ones of animals, ones of non-users. There's also some audio personas and video personas. So lots of things to inspire you. And yeah, and to just use as a reference as you go over time. So I hope that was very interesting for you and has inspired you. Now we've got some time for any questions or have a chat, or if anyone's has anyone used any non-human personas and want to talk about it, feel free. Don't be shy. Thanks, Monica. I can see a little virtual clap. Nice, thanks.
Hi, Damien.
Hey, Gustavo.
Yeah, I have a question. With the emergence of AI, how do you envision the use of non-human personas in smart systems and robots and non-living beings?
Yeah. Oh, so what do you mean to represent technology, or
Yeah, exactly. Since we'll be over time engaging more and more with smart objects and
yeah.
robots and AI.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's we were kind of talking about in the session earlier today, and why not? I guess it does depend on. The thing is that we've got to be careful. We don't try to humanize, and non-human things too much. So like when I showed you that paragraph, the empathy paragraph. It's good to have that, but most of your data and everything should be very much kind of, this is what's happening, and we don't humanize them too much. But yeah, I guess if technology becomes, I mean, you could create one for technology as it is today, and think about it as a living thing, so that we develop our relationship with it better.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have seen, a few articles about using AI to create personas. I think they could help as a starting point, but the thing is with AI, you have to be careful of bias, and perhaps incorrect information. So there can be a good starting point to generate ideas, but yeah, you've got to sort of do your own research on top of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Actually, I have a question, if I may, or
Yes.
at least anybody else want to ask something.
Isn't
Thank you,
it-
Damien, for this. Thank you, Damien, for this presentation. And I'm very happy. You've moved all of these concepts into a book format. That's really, really great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you if you have any advice, especially on the research part, because if we cannot talk to our stakeholder, which can be the forest, the sea, the lake, what is your suggestion for designers, but also researchers, either digital or physical product designers, researchers, what they could take into account when designing for non-human stakeholders?
Yeah, so it depends on like the resources that you have. Martin Tomich has come up with a really good idea to create a coalition of experts. Might have a biologist, a scientist, etc. But that's all not always going to be feasible, right? Like especially with a small team. So I think we just need to use fundamental best practices for research. And I've got this sort of information in the toolkit as well. So you can use academic work just as you would do any sort of research, but just using those best practices, like checking the sources, checking the date, making sure the sources are creditable, checking it across a few sources. If you can get access to an expert or two, I think it's best to just have a go at this first and get together your insights. So you're informed, you're using most of their time, and you can get some answers. From that, you can perhaps get some answers, but then also see if you've gaps, and that's what you can focus on when you talk to them. But this is like something new, and we're going to have to work this out. And that's why I think this is really, really important that more people, lots of different people, use these tools and then share back their experience, because yeah, we do need to kind of develop the best practices of using non-human personas. So I hope that helps somewhat. And if you use it, please share it back. So Priya, how did you measure the positive impact on your human persona? So I haven't really been able to do that, and that is that's the thing with these tools, is that they're not they're quite new. First of all, we don't have long-term evidence that they're going to of their impact, so we've got to be really careful about that. We can try to mitigate that by using futuring tools and try to speculate the impacts of our solutions. But since my first experimentations and doing some other learning, there's a few ideas in the book about setting metrics so that you can measure and then follow up with them. There's actually the final step of this journey of non-human personas is to stay with them. So you set the metrics, define what they are, that you can measure and look at the impact. But it can take quite a while. That's the only thing. So again, the more people experiment with them and share back their successes and their failures, I think the more that we can learn. Hey Susu, difficulty with AI non-human nature ecosystems need to be wired into the data and be included in algorithm, and that's where we need much more transparency. Yeah, true. We should be really clear that we are using AI as well. Yeah.
Yeah, because hi, here's Susie speaking.
Hey.
Yeah, because I spoke with just yesterday with climate scientists, and they are wondering how much AI is even looking at sustainability basic data to be included in learnings. And they are starting to reach out to OpenIA to debate just that. But I think it's really when you look at the current data, I mean, if you read books like Invisible Women, for example, when how much even women are not super duper represented, I wonder how well this will go. But okay, just a thought for everyone.
Yeah,
But
no,
thanks for the books and for presenting.
you're welcome. Thank you. Thanks. I think it's a good point. The other thing to remember AI is that it uses a lot of energy, and we should actually really temper our use of it, not just use it anytime. You know, like it's just being sort of energy aware in the digital space. That my friend Sandy Denhart could tell you a lot about. I can see is here. Check out her website, Green the Web, as I've said a few times. Any more questions or thoughts? Gustavo shared something there, ecology and artificial. Okay, that's a nice article. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming along. Have fun exploring. If you do, please share back any way you can. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, but share back more broadly as well. I think it's really important that we really develop these tools together and just keep an eye out of what works and what doesn't work. But hopefully they'll deepen our connection with the planet and with each other. That's the idea. So thank you. Let you all go. Ciao. Bye.